Yeah, Seth is a modern era modeler whose home layout features the Union Pacific in the San Francisco Bay Area circa 1999. He's an avid operator and hosts regular op sessions on his UP Oakland sub, as well as participating and being a regular operator at many Bay Area layouts and also layouts around the US and Canada. Seth is a founding director of both the Operations Special Interest Group and the Layout Design Special Interest Group. He specializes in communication systems for model railroads, having developed telephone systems for several operating layouts, including that of SN3 modeler Dale Kreutzer. Seth founded the Model Railroad Control Systems with his late business partner, Chuck Catania. MRCS offers CP nodes, CMRI nodes, telephone systems, train order board systems and accessories, and the popular MP series of switch machines from MTB, and many other electronic items to support operations. Well, Seth, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. So let's see. I'm Seth Newman. As Dave mentioned, I am the proprietor of Model Railroad Communication Systems. When Dave asked me to speak, I actually misunderstood him and thought he wanted a specialized version of my communications and model railroad clinic, and I'm going to give you a very short version of that and a quick introduction to model railroad control systems and elaborate a little bit on some things Dave mentioned in the introduction. So we're talking here about communications on railroads and how to model them. I don't need to read all the bullets, but I'm going to walk you through in general how you would design them, what the design considerations are, and talk a little bit about some offerings I have to help you realize a telephone system. And, this is just a teaser. You can always go to my website. The URL is at the bottom, modelrailroadcontrolsystems.com. And feel free to call me also. I'm happy to do a consult, no obligation. So communications for operations, different eras had different dispatching models, and they pretty much followed the technology that was available. So for most people who are modeling narrow gauge, that pretty much coincides with the timetable and train order era, and that was really because we could only communicate at fixed points, which were manned train order offices. We didn't have radio, we didn't have, or we couldn't afford to put signaling systems up. So these generally were done with telephone and telegraph. I could certainly help you with a telegraph system, but it's a bit involved, particularly because you have to have operators who can speak Morse, and more particularly railroad Morse, not international Morse, which that's what we all got our Boy Scout merit badges in, or our ham licenses for that matter. So, as narrow gaugers modeling less prosperous and older railroads, it's basically going to be phones for modeling. Quick timeline, telegraph actually was invented a little bit earlier, but certainly first commercialized around 1845, very rapidly adopted by railroads. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was a lead user and funder of Morse's experiments. And it spread very quickly. By 1851, Charles Minot used a telegraph to override a schedule, which was the only way they really had to regulate railroads at the time. And he was an official of a predecessor to the New York Central, I believe. And that's really where train orders came from. By the late 1860s, we have telephones. By the 1920s, they were in widespread use for dispatching. And if you go back and read some of the trade magazines of the era, you just find officials glowing about how much faster and more efficient and more accurate and safer it was to use telephones. And by the end of the well, by World War II, telegraph had largely been supplanted by telephones. There certainly were exceptions, but uh, generally dispatching was done by telephone. So, what are you concerned about? The era, we think we've pretty much established that. The jobs you want to model, where are you going to put all this stuff and all these people, and what your prototype did. And since you guys model such colorful prototypes that very often had unique practices, I would strongly suggest trying to, get as much of that in as you can and really make a statement about where you are and what you're doing. Because certainly as operators, we're role playing. It's a role playing game, and we want to suspend disbelief. And part of that is, to get ourselves in the role as much as we can. So what did they do? Generally single track with passing sidings, generally timetable and train order. So we need to have train order offices, and we probably need to have some kind of train order signals to tell people they need to stop and pick up orders. Uh, the operations. I mean, not to over overemphasize the point, but it's modeling the work of the railroad. So everything's compressed, and basically we're just going to model the fun jobs and try and not model the other stuff. That's going to be a dispatcher, train crews, and maybe operators. And that's going to really drive your design decisions, because if you have to have places for operators, you're going to need to design the layout so there's room for them, or you're going to compromise in some way. You'll have one operator covering several stations, or maybe your conductor just magically morphs into the operator every time you pass a station, and then he can call in and be the operator with the dispatcher at the time. So you need to understand that and then provide appropriate equipment. Um, Generally, we're trying to model communications among dispatchers and operators, or some approximation of operators. Um, in the real world, crews did not generally OS themselves, and if they did, they generally got an arbitrary payment because they had to become a temporary member of the Dispatchers and Telegraphers Union, and some telegrapher or dispatcher wasn't getting the work, so you had to pay them too. So the railroads didn't do that unless there really wasn't a good alternative. So you need to figure that out. Um, so then the question becomes, well, do you have space to put operators in? If you do, are they going to be in sound isolated areas, in which case you might use microphones and speakers, or are they going to be out in the layout room, in which case noise canceling headsets are going to be a better choice? If crews are going to be morphing into station operators, why, then there needs to be a place for them to do their work, where they can have a phone and do their writing and copy and read orders back. Um, you're going to make a decision as the owner of how much of this chatter you want in the room and how much you want to isolate it so that the crews really have the feeling of being out there on their own. Um, then once you do that, we can certainly help you create a very prototypical environment by using era appropriate phone equipment. But there are some limitations to that. They can be expensive, and generally they're not all that rugged. So you might end up using somewhat more modern phone equipment that doesn't mind being dropped on the floor, and might be a little more comfortable to use. Um, Here's a very quick diagram of a phone system. Has a power supply. It has what we call battery feed, which converts DC power into something that can power the phones while allowing you to talk over them. The dispatcher station is really a specialized phone, and then you have to have some mechanism to signal the stations and the crews that are approaching them what you'd like them to do, like stop and pick up the phone and call the dispatcher. So, determine where the dispatcher will be, determine where we're going to put phones representing stations, and find a place to put the telephone equipment. Typically it'll be a 2x2 backboard. It'd be good to make it comfortable because you'll be doing some work down there and to have some light. Um, and probably the less comfortable you make it, the more you're going to have to go back down there and do it again. So it's one of those things where you might want to do it right the first time. Um, talking a little bit about phones, many of you, I recognize the names. I think I've seen you at clinics. I've been presenting this clinic in one form or another for about 20 years. And in the old days, I used to really recommend using old telephone company equipment because there was lots of it around. It was obsolete, easy to get, cheap. There were lots of old phone guys, a lot of them in the hobby. They were probably 10 years older than me when I first got into the phone business, and this equipment was popular. So they were in their 30s in the 1970s. And I tried to keep the design very consistent with office telephone systems so that any old phone guy would know what he was looking at. And that worked great for a while. 20 years on, there's less old equipment around. The telephone collector hobby is pretty much even a little older than us. People have had to downsize. The old stuff is big and heavy. We refer to it as boat anchors, and people had to, let them go as they downsized. Also, of course, the old guys who worked on them are now in their 80s and 90s, so less able to get under your layout and do work. So I've moved to new designs that are really aimed to be model railroader friendly, and the idea is to make it so that if you can do a DCC install, you can do a phone install. Real quick bill of material to give you an idea of what these things typically cost. And the answer is, well, a lot less than a brass engine and probably a lot less than even a Blackstone engine. This would be for the typical system, which turns out to be about a dispatcher and 6 stations. This is based on Dale Kreutzer's phone system, but there's lots of others pretty much the same. You can do this with equipment you may have lying around, you find at yard sales or junk stores. You certainly don't need to buy all of it new or all of it from me. When you look at the cost of a phone at $25 and you realize that shipping it is a medium flat rate box, you can see that flat rate box is going to cost you $15 to ship. So, there's a big premium on sourcing it locally if you can. So here's what I've been doing lately. I've built a little system up. This is about 15 inches wide and 4 inches high. And it consists of a battery feed board, which essentially powers the phones. At least one dispatcher station. You can have multiple. A board that is used for distributing power and signal. So you don't need extra terminal blocks. You can just terminate on this. And the little board here for signaling that taps out the station's call sign in Morse code rather than a lot of bells ringing constantly. So, you don't need to do that, but it's nice and it's easy to do. Just to touch on that real quickly, generally, of course, if a dispatcher were calling an operator or a station, he would tap out the code, or he might just get on the phone line, and there would be some kind of loudspeaker or open speaker so that you could hear what was being said, and the operator would pick up and answer. But on the model, we generally consolidate all of our activity onto one phone line, so we can use this for talking to yards and towers if you have them. You might have an interlocking. Bells, buzzers, lights, all good things. And as I said, we have this cute little board that taps out Morse. Let's see what else. Another possibility, this was something we played with. In fact, I think the early version of it was Dale's. You simply have a push button and it operates a buzzer. But because the yard master might be away from his phone, or you might be buzzing a station in the aisle and the train might not be there yet, this little relay latches up and lights an LED so that the crew will know to come and pick up the phone at some point later. I used to just publish a a little schematic and say, get your own relay, but I ended up spending an awful lot of time talking people through it, so I just built it as a board. Um, some phones are difficult to get into because they're reproductions and they're basically consumer phones, don't have any extra contacts. Sometimes it's just an old piece of equipment that's hard to get into. So we make an off-hook detector if you need an extra contact for, these signaling schemes. You can just use that in series with the phone. Lots of possibilities. I'm always happy to talk about your project. Um, I can help you find equipment. One great thing that's just a lot of fun to do is if you've got a picture of one of your operator's offices or your dispatcher office, we can try and match the equipment there and you can set that up because, nothing sets the scene like walking into the crew lounge, seeing the dispatcher set up, much like Dale has, and the proper equipment that the RGS would have had there. And, it's great fun to do that. I've got lots of application notes, so if you want to try something yourself, there's a lot of good information. So, real quickly, let's just move on to some other things we do with model railroad control systems. Basically, our goal when we started the company was to do cool electronics for operations. A lot of this stuff, almost all of this is open source. So I publish the designs. You can make your own circuit board. You can take our designs and modify them. The code is up there. Again, if you're a programmer, have a friend that is, you're welcome to download the code. It mostly runs on Arduinos. Modify it to suit, it's great if you've done that and you want to contribute that back and other people can play with your great idea also. An awful lot of the designs are done by guys who are electronic people, but they really don't want to be in the business of model railroading. And so I, run the website, which I need to do anyway, and I'm happy to handle this stuff. I also handle some commercial products so you can have a single source. The technical term in the industry is one throat to choke. So you can buy with confidence. Let's see. We make CMRI nodes. This is more for CTC and fairly serious layout animation and automation. Generally not the focus of narrow gauge, but we can certainly do it. A couple of things that may find use are wiring adapters, occupancy detectors, both current and optical, controllers for various types of switch machines, and power distribution boards. Let's see, switch motors. As Dave mentioned, I handle the MP series low profile motors. These are about the sixth of the volume of the industry standard tortoise, which is fine. But if you have narrow decks or you want to put these on modules, the low profile motors are really wonderful. We make mounts for servos, servo drivers, twin coil drivers, pretty much everything that has ever been made that'll throw a point we can do. Here's just a quick picture of the MP motors. These are roughly 2 inches by 1.75 inches. It comes in a single contact version and a double pull, double throw version, which comes with a cute little connector so you can do harnessing. Let's see. Ooh, went way too far. Hang on. Sorry about that. You can see there was a whole lot more to the phone presentation that we didn't do. Here we go, motors. Other goodies for train order operation. Semaphore controller. You can see that this guy is designed to mount under the layout, and each servo controls one semaphore arm. So, it's great for train order boards. If you're doing ABS signaling, probably not that common in the narrow gauge, but this could handle 2 facing signals at a block boundary. It could handle 2 lower quadrant semaphores like the SP had. And this is just done with a little Arduino Nano. Approach indicator, again, if you're going to have operators, usually they have some sort of circuit that gave them a ding when a train was approaching the station. This was called being on the bell, and we have a little controller that does that, and that operates with a nice little recording of a US&S bell. So anyway, cute thing if you need those. Flagman. Again, you're doing timetable and train order. You spend a lot of time flagging out. This is designed with pads that will cover HON or ON3 track, and the little LED lights up. It will also cause any current type detector to detect. But generally, you can protect your train when you're working on the main. They're little kits and they come in packs of 4 or 8, or if you need more, give me a call and we'll figure out some kind of arrangement. Fast clocks, again, that's important for timetable and train order. Happily I'm trying to remember the name of them, GMRC maybe. Mike Dodd is now handling that as well as his old one. So there were some somewhat orphan clock systems. These are good guys. I'm happy to see them still in service, but if you want something a little different, we offer a Wi-Fi clock. Use a Windows computer to set the time, and we support analog clock displays. Those you'll need to reset if you're going to change the time. Digital ones, which of course follow immediately. And you can just use any old computer, tablet, or phone as a clock display. So you don't need to invest in specialized hardware, and you can certainly reuse old computer equipment, which most of us have piles of. We do simple signaling and accessories, again, less of an issue in the narrow gauge world, but there are all sorts of useful things, and you might have an interlocking where a lot of this might be useful. I support a bunch of community projects. There are a lot of, as I say, designs that have been contributed. A couple that are popular are low-cost keep-alives. Jeff Bunza has done a series of interesting projects in MRH. Almost all of them I've done boards for, and we stock them. Grade crossing controllers, stepper motor controllers, Arduino relays that can be used for staging controllers, as well as interlocking, modular signaling systems. So a bunch of cool stuff that you might find useful. And that's basically it. Here's some resources for the phone equipment. This pitch or the more complete version is on my website, modelrailroadcontrolsystems.com/telephones, and or just go to the menu on the front page. All this stuff is there. If you can't find it, just give me a call or send me an email, sales@Model Railroad Control Systems. If you have the OPSIG compendium, there's a book or articles formatted version of the same phone presentation. Here's a couple of people who've contributed over the years. A few of them are no longer with us. And that's about it. Dave, I think we kept to your half hour.